If you're a mid-level to C-suite leader who wants to own your growth and figure out your next small, brave move to achieve your leadership goals, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Small Brave Moves podcast, a weekly deep dive on how to be braver in leadership and in life for exceptional results. I'm your host, Nicole Bianchi, best-selling author, certified master executive coach, NSA certified speaking professional, chief bravery officer, and tough talk expert. If you're ready to become a better, braver, and more authentic leader, let's dive in. Hello, friends and brave leaders. Welcome back to the Small Brave Moves podcast. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the hardest conversations a leader can have, the moving on conversation. We'll explore how to navigate these pivotal moments when it's time to establish a new path forward from a project, position, or relationship that's just no longer working. Let's dive in. During my time in HR at Conagra Brands, the company was going through its first major workforce reduction, and my role was to meet with the employees individually to deliver the news and present their severance packages. Hopefully you deep sighed on that one because that's exactly how I felt. The days leading up were so intense, and we had to spend hours behind closed doors really preparing. And the night before the layoffs, the weight of what I was about to do really hit me. People's lives were about to change, and I struggled with the responsibility of delivering that message. Well, the next morning, I set my intention to approach each conversation with empathy, focused not on the end of their current role, but on the path forward. I was still nervous, but I knew I had to lead with care. And as the first employee came in, and before I could even get through my entire script, he stood up, hugged me, and thanked me. He said he had been thinking about leaving for some time, but just didn't know how to take that step. And that moment shifted my perspective. I realized that the moving on conversation didn't have to be solely about the departure. It could be about helping someone find their next opportunity. The moving on talk is often the toughest conversation because it always involves a departure, whether it's a project, maybe a position, or even a relationship. And just because it's difficult doesn't mean it has to be negative. When approached with intention and care, it can create clarity and open up new possibilities for everyone involved. So let's break it down a bit. Moving on doesn't always mean someone's leaving the company. It can mean stepping away from a project that's no longer serving its purpose, maybe transitioning out of a role that's not the right fit. It can even mean letting go of a professional relationship that's no longer healthy or productive. In all of these cases, there's action and a path forward. In fact, most moving on conversations can be avoided by successfully having the earlier tough talks, like how we work or the ask. But when it's clear that something's no longer working, it's time to have a brave conversation about moving on. So there are 3 types of moving on conversations. Number 1, moving on from a position. Often this type of conversation is initiated by the employee. In many cases, people leave jobs because of their leadership, not necessarily the company itself. I remember my daughter Mo experienced this firsthand. She worked at a high-growth startup and had all of the earlier tough talks, the how we work, the ask, the what's going on. Yet the dysfunction within the leadership was not changing. And after months of trying to make things work, she realized it was time to move on. She prepared for that conversation and anticipated how the CEO would react, knowing he might try to deflect or challenge her decision. Despite the difficult dynamics, she remained calm, stuck to the facts, and repeated her message with clarity. She took control of that situation and made the decision to move forward with grace and professionalism. The next one is moving on from a project. As leaders, we sometimes have to make the tough call to end a project that's just not working. Several years ago, I was hired to coach a leadership team, and it was by the CEO. So I had set clear agreements, the how we work, with the CEO on how the process would work and what I expected of him, what he should expect of me. And one of those expectations was that he would model the behavior we were working on with his leadership team. Yet, during the sessions, his leaders shared that he wasn't following through on that agreement. In fact, he was consciously undermining it. So here I go, have to have a direct conversation with him about it, asking him to acknowledge his behavior. And he admitted, he said, "Nicole, I have no intention of changing." That was my cue to have the moving on conversation. It wasn't easy to walk away from the revenue, but it was the right thing to do for everyone involved. I ended that project and refunded the unused portion of the fee, knowing it was the right move for me. It was going to be a project I just wouldn't be successful in. Number 3, moving on from a relationship. If you've had the previous tough talks, especially the being better, and you still can't align with someone, it may be time to move on from the relationship. I've had to make that decision as well. In one instance, I replaced a beloved leader as CHRO, and one of the managers under my leadership team struggled with the transition. And after giving her time, having several tough conversations with her, it was clear she wasn't going to get on board with the new direction. And I had to have the moving on conversation with her, explaining I understood she was still grieving the loss of the previous leader, but the current situation wasn't serving her or the team. And she ultimately chose to transition out of that position. So how do you approach a moving on conversation effectively? Well, there are 3 key steps to follow. Step 1, the decision. First, state that decision clearly. This is about using straightforward, factual language to communicate what's been decided. Avoid beating around the bush. For example, we've decided that it's time to move on from this project because it's no longer aligned with our goals. It's a great way that's clear, concise, and direct. Step 2, the reason. Next, I want you to explain the reason behind the decision. This is the why. Keep it clear and concise. The goal is just to bring clarity to the situation. Think of the decision as the what and the reason as the why. For example, the project has not been delivering the results we expected, and continuing it would not be in the best interest of the company. Step 3, the action. Finally, outline the action that needs to be taken. This could involve setting up a transition plan, discussing new roles, or figuring out what steps are necessary for the next phase. The action could be immediate, or it could be a gradual transition. You might also give the person options and allow them to take some ownership of what those next steps look like too. One of the reasons we fear the moving on conversation is because we often assume it's always negative, but that's not the case. In fact, it can begin in the beginning of a new, healthier chapter for everyone involved. Whether you're departing from a role, a project, or a relationship, the goal is to frame the conversation as an opportunity for growth. So it's important to remember that the moving on conversation comes from a place of caring. It's about helping someone else or everyone, in this case, move forward rather than stay stuck in a situation that's simply no longer working. I hope today's episode has given you the confidence to navigate those tough moving on conversations with clarity and compassion. Remember, brave leaders embrace change and help others to do the same. If you found today's episode valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Until next time, stay brave and keep leading with courage.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Small Brave Moves podcast. If you're wanting to take this work even deeper, I'm here to help. From engaging in inspirational keynote speeches to transformational coaching and workshops for leaders and teams, page-turning books, online courses, and enlightening leadership development retreats. There are so many ways that we can work together to take your leadership to the next level. For more information, check out the show notes, and let's do this together, one small brave move at a time. See you next week.